want to speak to you today on a well in your wilderness. I don't know how this is going to come together because who God gave me as the scripture sample is not who we typically would refer to in the Feast of Tabernacles, but I'm praying that it's going to hit somebody and mean something to somebody, because when God does it, it's not for naught. So I just want to talk to you. When background, we know that we are the Feast of Tabernacles is the time that we're looking at provision and looking at how God made a way for the children of Israel in the wilderness. And we know in the wilderness there was no planning. There wasn't an urban planning that laid out the groundwork for how they were going to survive in each one of their destinations as they were going along the journey, right? So it is a total dependence upon God. Total reliance that the compass, the divine compass, is headed in the right direction. So I want to talk, there's a story about when the American West was settled, many travelers passed over the fertile land of the territory of Nebraska. Thought this might help us kind of bring it home a little bit to modern day. The dirt there is rich and black, but the travelers couldn't see water anywhere, and they thought the land would be good for nothing. One writer called it the Great American Desert. Some people even died on the journey for lack of refreshment. Today, Nebraska is all about farming. Now it is called the breadbasket of America. More wheat and corn are grown there than any other state in the Union. What happened? What made the difference that those early travelers didn't see? This is the eye of Nebraska, the Ogallala Aquifer. It lies under the state of Nebraska. It's an underground lake that lies under 2/3 of the state. The Ogallala Aquifer is responsible for 30% of the water used to irrigate crops in the United States. The Ogallala Aquifer also supplies refreshment. 90% of the fresh water to nearly 3 million people in 8 states comes from it. And remember, this is a place where people were dying from thirst. Right underneath them. Wow. Right underneath them. Someone got the bright idea to dig down and found all the water they needed to turn the great American desert into the breadbasket of America. Many of those travelers on the Great Plains died from lack of refreshment. What they didn't know was that the water was just a few feet under the surface of the dry land. Where they were dying of thirst would become the region that supplies at least 1/5 of the total annual U.S. agricultural harvest, more than $20 billion worth of food and fiber in the world's markets. If it were to dry up, scientists say it would take natural processes 6,000 years to refill it. Refreshment. In the form of water, it quenches the parched thirst, regulates the body temperature and functions, lubricates joints, delivers oxygen through the body, removes waste, cushions the brain. Water. Refreshment. In the spiritual form, refreshment is the water of the word. Refreshment in the spiritual comes through a refocusing of our attention from our circumstances to the Lord. His sovereignty that leaves nothing in our lives as a surprise to him, and his love that assures us that regardless of what we go through, he's got us. It comes through fellowship. It comes through admonition and encouragement of like-minded people. That's why it's important for us to come together. We get strength from one another. We get encouragement from one another. Proverbs 11:25 says, whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered. That's why it's important for us to come not with our complaints, not with our disgruntlement, but come ready to water. Water one another.
Amen.
Be encouragement to one another. Leviticus 23, verse 39 and 40 says, also in the 15th day of the 7th month, when ye have gathered in the fruit of the land, ye shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days. On the first day shall be a Sabbath, on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. And ye shall take you on the first day the boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and the boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook. And ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. We are commanded to rejoice.
Amen.
And so it's a challenge for us on a daily basis to think about all the things that God has done for us. But we're commanded in this 7-day window to rejoice. And I know for me, we've got inconvenience, we've got issues, we got travel, so we don't necessarily come here every day during the feast. And that can sometimes you get caught up in the rest of the world, how life runs. So it's easy for us to forget about rejoicing, deliberately rejoicing for 7 days. So I'm going to challenge you today. 7 days.
7 days.
Rejoice. Think about what God has done for you. Think about what God has brought you from last year to this year. Think about where God is taking you from now into next year. We know that every day isn't promised, but I know that today I'm just overjoyed and overflow. I got something to be thankful for right now. So if tomorrow doesn't come, I can rejoice today. I've got rejoicing in my heart right now because of what he has done now. But I look forward to what God has before us. So here's my dilemma. He gave me Hagar to talk about. He gave me Hagar. And so, Hagar wasn't the mother of the children of Israel.
Amen.
So I'm like, God, why? Somebody knows. Somebody knows. So I'm just going to give you what he gave me, and the Lord do his thing.
Amen.
So in Genesis 21, verses 14 to 20, and Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder. And the child and sent her away, and she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. And she went and sat her down over against him a good way off, as it were a bow shot. For she said, let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad. And the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, what aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand. For I will make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the bottle with water, and gave the lad drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. Hagar is an interesting character. Hagar was the Egyptian handmaid of Sarah. In Genesis 16, I believe it is, Hagar was hearing the voice of the Lord. The angel of the Lord came and visited her. This is the Egyptian handmaid. The angel of the Lord came and visited her, right? She was pregnant. It wasn't like she signed up. I want to be Abraham's side thing. It wasn't like she was fiending for the affection of Abraham. Sarah said, hey, look, I'm not going to be able to do this thing. He needs a kid. Slave that you are, can you go help a sister out? Wasn't her choice. There wasn't something she said, this is what I want to do. But this is what she ended up being given to. So life can throw some curveballs that can overwhelm your thoughts and drive you to some extreme actions. It can make you feel like you're at the end of your story. No way out. How many times have we gotten to a place where we feel like there's no way out? But we're here now. It's the enemy's job to blind us to what God has provided for us. It's the enemy's job to get us caught up in ourselves and to get us caught up in what we can't do in order to blind us to what God can do. We get distressed and we get defeated. We get caught in a thought. The perpetual loop. I can't, so we won't, so we don't. I can't, so we can't, so we won't, so we don't. And it just keeps feeding itself. And I'll never get out. You won't because you can't. And you won't, so you don't. Just keeps feeding itself. So Hagar, as Sarah's Egyptian servant, had been the pawn of Sarai's unbelief. She was the pawn. I didn't have a choice. You just do what I told you to do. So when Sarah gave Hagar to Abram to bring forth a child because she didn't believe, then she came forth with child. She bare fruit. And then Sarah got mad. Have we done that before? We want to help God fix it. We put some things in action to help him fix it. And then they start to bring forth fruit and we get mad. Because it wasn't what he wanted, it's what we wanted. But what we wanted had some limited vision on how it would manifest. Y'all heard the term unintended consequences? We go into a lot of things thinking that we know what is supposed to happen. And we don't. So Hagar didn't ask for the assignment. She wasn't a hidden mistress. Bible says when she got pregnant, she looked with contempt on her mistress. This is in the Amplified, regarding Sarai as an insignificant because of her infertility. Sarah put her in the position. And now she's reaping the consequence. In the backdrop on chapter 21, when Hagar is being sent out, so Ishmael is about 14. So Ishmael was born when Abraham was 86, right?
Yes.
And Isaac was born when he was 100. So he's 14, thereabouts. So Ishmael was making fun of Isaac. Ishmael's 14. Isaac's. Let me ask you, somebody make fun of your baby? New moms, I'm just saying, After you got 2 and 3, I'm just like, you'll be all right. Suck it up. Don't be messing with my baby. Don't mess with my baby. In corporate America, did you coach and did you counsel? Did you let her know that it bothered you? Did you help her understand how you wanted her to interact? Did she talk to Ishmael? I just want to make sure that they had all the resources to do the right thing before you make any drastic decisions. Okay? Did you have those resources? Sarah said she got to go. He got to go. He is not going to have any part in my child's inheritance. My child's the promised seed. I know I put you in this position, but you got to go. And so, chapter 21, we find Ishmael and Hagar on their way out with a bottle of water and some food, headed to wander in the desert of Beersheba. So, in Hagar's position, how many of you found yourself to be victims of circumstance? I didn't make this ball start rolling, but I'm caught up in the avalanche. It's an interesting story because what starts to be Sarah, who's the mother of Israel, mistreating Hagar. Because remember, in 16, she was harsh with her. That's why she ran away the first time. She got harsh with her, and that's when the Lord came and spoke to Hagar through the angel of the Lord and said, "Where are you going? Where are you coming from, and where are you going?" And all she could answer was, "I'm running from my mistress, because she's dealing harshly with me." Something that Pastor just spoke to, he asked her, "Where are you going?" She didn't answer. Can't see the future. I don't have a hope in that there is a future for me. I'm in a very difficult circumstance right now, and all I know is I had to go. I had to get away. We can run away from our problems, but the problem doesn't leave. And so he had to speak to her and tell her, return and submit. Return and submit. You mean I've got to go back to a place of discomfort? Place where I'm not called by my name. I'm just the maidservant. But he called her by her name. He called her by her name. We can be in a place where those around us don't acknowledge us. And we can feel like we are surrounded but isolated. But the angel of the Lord is visiting to say, I hear you and I see you. I hear you and I see you. Ishmael, I believe his name was, I heard your affliction. The angel of the Lord came and spoke to Hagar and said, I see you. And so I was like, Lord, what in the Feast of Tabernacles, what does this mean? Is there's somebody that doesn't feel like I'm the children of Israel. There's somebody that feels disconnected. There's somebody that feels like God doesn't know where I am. But I'm telling you, he reached out to Hagar through the angel of the Lord and says, I see you. The tables turned because Sarah was mistreating Hagar, mother of Israel, mistreating Egypt. And we know as time passed, those tables turned, and Egypt became the oppressor of Israel. Depression causes us to make some bad decisions. It distorts our perspective. So in Genesis 16:10, the Lord had promised Hagar at the onset of her pregnancy, I'll multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. And in Genesis 16:12, he said, he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Think about what he just told Hagar. Does that sound familiar? Who else got a promise like that? That's Abraham's promise. He gave it to Abraham. He gave it to Abraham. But he's speaking to the woman who didn't have a name among the people and says, I'm going to multiply your seed. You're not forgotten. God knows you. He knows your name. So distortion will cause these things, but then God will give us direction. Purpose comes when you place your hope in God. In Genesis 16, verse 7 to 14, Hagar is portrayed as a woman, a foreign woman, an Egyptian woman who knows God personally. Because God comes to speak to her, and she recognizes his voice. The Egyptian woman, the slave woman. Somebody thinks they can't hear God because they're not where they think they should be. But the Egyptian woman heard God. And he didn't call her out of her name. He called her by her name. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, and the spring on the way to Shur. So she was on her way home because Shur is on the way to Egypt. And he said, Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted from multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, now you have conceived and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael, for the Lord has given heed to your affliction. Hagar's response speaks to her not seeing a future, but only her past. When Hagar was physically separated from the people of her oppression, that's when she developed her relationship with God. She sees and hears and has all, when she thinks that Sarah and Abram have all her life in control in their hands, she sees that God has a greater plan. So understand that your problem is not greater than your purpose. It's not greater than your purpose. So you sometimes got to work through that problem to see your purpose. But it's not greater than your purpose. If she had not put her hope and trust in the direction from the Lord, that direction to return and submit, she and Ishmael would have died. Lamentations 3:21-24 says, this I recall to my mind, therefore have I hope. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, saith my soul. Therefore will I hope in him. We can be in position where we don't have hope. We've got to put our hope in the Lord, because men are going to fail us. Men will fail us. Then we go to discovery. So we've gone from distortion to direction to discovery. We're going to get to, you got to dig a little deeper. Goes back to the story in the beginning. It looks like it's dry land, but we got to keep digging. Just dig a little deeper until the water springs forth. In verse 17 to 19, God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. And we go down to verse 19. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the bottle with water and gave the lad drink. So it's something, Israel had to dig their wells. Somehow this well was already there. We're going to reap where we didn't sow. We're going to reap where we didn't sow. The presence of God brings to us peace. The presence of God brings to us provision. Acts 3:19 says, Repent therefore and be converted, that your sins may be blotted out, so that the times of refreshing may come from the presence of the Lord. God had not forgotten her. The God that showed up when she was running away from Sarai in Genesis 16 showed up in chapter 21 when she had been sent away by Sarah and Abraham. He saw her in the beginning, and he sees her now. He saw you in your beginning, and he sees you now. We have to continue to remind ourselves that God is with us. God's promises are our hope for the future. The enemy wants to get us caught up in the traps of right now, but don't forget what God promised you. If it hasn't come to pass, then there is still more to do. There is still more to hope for. There is still more to hold on to. The peace of God, he told her, fear not. Don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, that peace that surpasses all understanding, that's what will guard your hearts, because otherwise we're going to get caught up again in what's going on right now. God's peace follows God's presence. Look for God's presence. Hagar once had the option to go back to her place of physical bondage to fulfill God's plan. Now the peace and purpose of God would have to sustain her moving forward with no place to go back to. Safety consists not in the absence of danger, but in the presence of God. The peace that Jesus gives is not the absence of trouble, but is rather the confidence that he is there with you always. Peace is such a precious jewel that I would give anything for it but truth. That was from Matthew Henry. The provision of God is when her eyes were open to a well before her in a dry and desert land. Pray that God will open your eyes in your desert place. Because some of us feel like we are going through some situations and there is no way out. We feel like we are in a desert land and that we are dying of thirst and that there is no refreshment, there is no renewal. But God is calling for us to dig a little deeper. Beersheba means perfect oath. That's the picture of the Bible. God opened her eyes so she could see what he had provided. In our problems, we grow blind to God's provisions. But open your eyes to see God's provisions. Some wells that are around us, because remember that was the title, a well in your wilderness. The goodness of God, Psalms 33:5, the earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. Another well, the grace of God. And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. The greatness of God. God is greater than your problems. Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. If your perception of God is greater than your problems, you got faith. If your perception of God is less than your problems, you've got fear. There's a story of a man named Worrell. He had been stricken with rheumatoid arthritis at age 15, and by the age of 45, he was totally paralyzed except for one finger. He could barely speak and was totally blind. But he had a string tied to that one mobile finger that could turn on a recorder. He wrote for national magazines, authored books, and led a happy and influential life from his bed. This was possible because after initial prayers brought no healing, he accepted his lot graciously and said, well, Lord, if this is the size, plot, and life you've staked out for me, let's you and me together show the world what we can grow on it. Dig a little deeper. Drink from the well in your wilderness. I pray this message has been a blessing to somebody. Thank you.